Revelation 21:6. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely.
Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and I thought I would let James do the introduction for today's video. So, continuing our Capital Wasteland Ecology series, we're going to talk about water. Obviously, water everywhere, not a drop to drink is a common saying. Water is life. Life, as we know it, can't exist without water. The world has a water cycle, so water, like energy, it's not really lost, it's just passed around and converted into different things and follows this kind of cycle. And there's very few living organisms that can survive for long periods of time without water. Some viruses can, but they're not quite living things. They kind of exist in a sort of living, sort of not kind of state. But any ecosystem that exists on the planet has a water cycle, including aquatic marine ecosystems, but also land ecosystems and even desert ecosystems. Water is still involved at some stage. It has to be for life to continue. So water's used by living things for metabolism, for basically making their bodies function and various things. It's excreted into the environment in various ways. Gets evaporated into the sky and then falls again as rain. So there's three kinds of water that you find on Earth. You've got your fresh water, which is your sort of lakes, rivers, ponds, that kind of thing. Salt water, which would be the oceans and the seas. And atmospheric water, which is your clouds and your rain and snow and things as well. And temperature plays a big role in the water cycle as well. So warmer temperatures allow water to evaporate. Cooler temperatures condense it so that it becomes liquid again and then falls as rain or snow if it's cold enough. And living things take water in through drinking, through the root systems for plants, and absorbing it in other capacities as well. And then water is lost from living things through evaporation, through things like urine, sweat, all that kind of thing. The other important one that's not relevant to this location, but obviously ice, the crunchy kind of water, is another form. It's the same stuff, just that it's cold enough that it stays frozen. Your permafrost, your tundra, and the polar ice caps, a lot of water is stored in there in the form of ice, and that goes through a cycle as well, where icebergs break off of glaciers and then they melt into the sea, and it all becomes this kind of cycle. So it's all things. So I will put up on the screen here a kind of infographic that shows the water cycle, so you can see there's groundwater and then there's rivers and ponds, and they feed into the oceans, and then the water evaporates into the sky, and there's a whole cycle that it goes through. But living things, obviously, it's very important because they do use water for various functions. And water's also produced as a byproduct of cellular metabolism as well. So the total amount of water that's on Earth doesn't really change very much. It just gets cycled through the environment and cycled through living things. And it's essentially still the same water. Plants and animals can conserve water and adapt to their environment. So you'll find that desert adapted species of plants and animals are really good at conserving the water in their bodies so that they don't lose as much, because it's not as common for them to find it. While animals and plants that live in a more temperate region where there's plenty of rainfall and things, they don't need to worry about conserving that so much. So, things like your kind of cacti and succulent type plants in the desert, they have a reservoir of water inside them, but most plants actually do that. And then they use the water that they need for whatever functions, metabolic functions or whatever, and then water is also lost from the plants and it's released as a vapor into the air, which is a process called transpiration. And plants, their existence also helps keep water in the ground and allow rain to soak into the ground, because it stops the kind of erosion and the runoff. So when rain falls, if there's root systems there, it's less likely to run over the top of the ground, and it'll soak into the ground, and it'll keep the water in that place for the plants and animals to make use of. So this is basically the reason that the Capital Wasteland has become a desert. So yeah, that's the reason that the Capital Wasteland has essentially become a desert, because all the plant life is dead. As you can see, the trees here, because there was fires, because of the nukes, it's destroyed, most of the plant life, especially the trees and things, which act as quite major reservoirs of water. And there's only really a handful of water sources around. We've obviously got the Potomac River, but it has eroded and the water level is far lower than it should be. And then we've got the tidal basin here next to the Jefferson Memorial with Project Purity. The aging plumbing infrastructure in some of the buildings still works, and also groundwater, like the pool that's formed a megaton by the unexploded bomb. But what's the problem with all this? All of this water is contaminated with radiation. Before you complete the game of Fallout 3, there is no open sources of water that are not contaminated with radiation. The only pure water you can find is bottles of purified water in some places, and they're quite rare. So all this water is radiated, and life can't go long without drinking and without taking in water. So living things are going to be forced to use this contaminated water because there is no alternative. And that's going to have an impact, because purified water is so rare, but drinking contaminated water is going to make people sick. It's going to affect the animals. It's going to affect all life in the wasteland. So this is the reason that people probably don't bother giving the purified water to the water beggars at the larger settlements, because it's too precious to just hand out to random strangers. That's kind of the way the wasteland is. So the species that live in this environment with this irradiated water, they have to either adapt or die. It's how it works when the environment changes, and when there's, dangers or disease or anything else that changes the way the environment works and affects how life functions. That's the way life has to function. They have to either adapt or they're going to die out. And we've seen that most of the species that have survived in this area have adapted to the radiation and developed radiation resistance, especially the insects and the death claws. The algae as well, they're gullified bears, they're comparable to ghouls, so they're resistant to radiation and possibly even healed by it, but I don't think that's an effect that's really seen in the game. So again, they've kind of developed this resistance to the radiation in the water. Humans, less so, but we'll get to that. And I do want to particularly note the mirelurks here. So we can see, well, there's a few dead ones, we can see them in the water. So they're the only really kind of aquatic species in the Capital Wasteland is the mirelurks, and they've evolved from the horseshoe crabs and the blue crabs. I have done a whole video on them quite extensively on their biology. I'll link that playlist in the description if you've not seen it. But the mirelurks are thriving in this radioactive water. The dirty contaminated water with the radiation, they love it. They're adapted to live in it. They're quite happy with it. But it's more than that, and it's essential for them, and that's what we're seeing here. So we can see some dead mirelurks. So this is a post-game Broken Steel save file. So completed the game, didn't put the modified FEV in the water, as far as I remember anyway. But yeah, so now all this water that's flowing out of the Jefferson Memorial, this is purified water, it's clean, it's radiation free, because that was the point of the main plot, was to get that working. And what that means is that once you've done that, you've completed your parents' life's work, you've done it, everything's great, there's clean water for everybody, it's fantastic. and we're assuming that you're not so evil that you've put the modified FEV in. So this water can be collected and shipped out to the local settlements, and people can have nice clean water, so that's great. So the Mirelurks aren't happy about it, because they've evolved to live in this contaminated, irradiated water. They can't live in the clean water anymore. It's too clean for them. So when you come here, you'll see there is a Brotherhood guy that normally shoots them. But if we just use VATS on this guy's actually the health. This one isn't, yeah. So you'll find Mirelurks in this water that are just sitting on low health. This one seems to be fine for some reason. Or you'll find dead ones along the shore, and that is purely an effect that because this water's clean now, the Mirelurks can't live in it. And I say there's usually a Brotherhood person that's kind of mopping them up and killing them just to get them out of the way, because they could still attack even though they are weakened and they're potentially dangerous to water caravans. So when it comes to evolution, environmental pressures are a big driving factor for evolution. When things in the environment change, living things have to start to adapt to that, or they're going to end up, struggling to cope and dying out. And the thing I think a lot of people don't really get about evolution is it's something that takes a long time. It's not something that happens from one generation to the next. I mean, sure, you could have a mutation that's passed from a parent to an offspring, but that's not evolution. That's just a mutation that's been passed down. And mutations can be harmful, they can be beneficial, they can not mean anything and not do anything at all. But evolution takes several generations, and depending on the life cycle of the species we're talking about, that could be hundreds of years, millions of years, for drastic changes to happen. It's not something that happens really quickly. For species with short lifespans, so when we see bacteria with genes for antibiotic resistance, for example, that's a common one and it's an important one. Because bacteria can replicate it basically exponentially in ideal conditions, they can replicate, and divide within minutes. That because their generational cycle is so short, that these things can be passed on and spread, so they can evolve very quickly. Whereas for other species, it'll take a lot longer. But for our crabby friends here, their lifespan is a lot shorter than ours, so you could definitely see, and we obviously have seen changes. Radiation has definitely had an impact on that as well. It's increasing mutation rates and things like that, which could be a driving factor. FEV is also potentially involved, the forced evolutionary virus, and that's basically its purpose is to speed up the process of evolution. Kind of makes sense. So in humans it'll take a lot longer for them to evolve unless we do force it with some kind of virus or something. So what does Project Purity really mean for the future of the Capital Wasteland? So again, we're assuming that you did the good version. So we've got this pure water here that's readily available, and they're collecting it and shipping it out, but they're not really charging people for it as far as I'm aware. I think what they're doing is that somebody just going for a swim? Okay. I'm pretty sure that's a person. Yeah, Brotherhood was stealing a shit, going for a swim. Fair enough. So, one of the big things is that clean water is going to improve the health of the people living here. Because they're not going to be suffering radiation sickness to the same degree. Clean water is going to have less parasites and potentially disease-causing organisms in it. So people are going to be healthier. And healthier people can reproduce and rebuild. So populations can grow and resist the dangers of the wasteland better. And the short-term survival is improved. And this has been proven since the very beginning of human history. So when you look at the very earliest kind of societies that developed, the earliest civilizations that developed on Earth, so Mesopotamia, Mesopotamia, I don't know why I can't say that one, China, Egypt. The Nile was such a big thing for the ancient Egyptians, the Indus River Valley civilization. Um, all of these earliest societies grew up around water sources, especially the Nile, the desert in, Northeast Africa meant that people couldn't live out there, but they could live along the banks of the Nile because there was water, they could grow crops, all that kind of thing. And food security is something in the long term that's going to be beneficial for survival as well. Because, like what these ancient civilizations did, they developed irrigation systems that could allow for agriculture to develop. Because that's one thing that the capital wasteland is lacking, is agriculture. People keep Brahmin, which do provide food and transport and all these things, but there's not really an abundance of fresh vegetables or fruit or anything like that that's available, or grains. Growing grains here isn't really an option just now. So having this purified water could allow for that. They could set up irrigation systems. And evidence of irrigation has been discovered in the Middle East, Mesopotamia, as we mentioned, the Indus Valley civilization, ancient Egypt, Nubia, the Andes Mountains in South America, Persia, and China. The early civilizations that existed in human history had some form of irrigation system in order to grow food. And the thing about the wasteland is, okay, yes, there's pre-war food that's found that's 200 years old and somehow still doesn't have hasn't expired. I hate to think what kind of preservatives are in it, but it's going to run out eventually. People have been scavenging it for 200 and something years. There's going to come a point where there's none left because it's not really being manufactured anymore. So it's something that having a system where we can improve food security, we can grow crops, we can grow feed for livestock, so we could produce more Brahmin and start getting dairy on the go, as well as, providing meat and all that kind of thing. So having clean water allows for all of that to develop, and that's something that there's potential for. Whether it'll happen or not, we don't know, but the potential's there. And the other side of it is kind of sanitation. So some of the places in Fallout do still have sort of functioning indoor plumbing, toilet facilities and things like that, but water treatment facilities are largely non-functional. This one is obviously the only one that's functional here. And waste management is an important thing as well when it comes to water. So raw sewage needs to be kept away from drinking water supplies, because nobody wants cholera or dysentery, right? We don't. That's not a good time. And again, we can look back to ancient civilizations because we're post-apocalyptic. That's kind of in a way what's happened, is that we've reverted society back to the beginning of human civilization, and people are, you would hope that people are going to make better decisions going forward, but they don't necessarily. It's kind of the point of the whole thing. But we can look back to these ancient civilizations and see that they knew this needed to be done a long time before germ theory was ever thought of. So long before we knew that there was microscopic bacteria and fungi and viruses that could make people sick, they realised that contaminating things with raw sewage makes people sick, so we need to make sure that the water's not contaminated. So they understood this, even if they didn't really know the minute details of exactly why that was the case. So the city of Uruk in ancient Mesopotamia has the earliest recorded pit toilet. The Indus Valley civilization has the world's first urban sanitation system. And in Scarabray, which is a Neolithic settlement in Orkney in Scotland, actually had a set up where there was running water underneath that drained away the waste, and they even built cubicles over them. So it's like they had toilet cubicles in Orkney like a couple of thousand years ago, a few thousand years ago. It's something that it's not a new concept. And the Romans as well, they had a very extensive system for waste management. They actually had a lot of good setups in the ancient Roman Empire. And it's not as easy to do here in Fallout because obviously there was a lot of infrastructure pre-war, but it's all fallen apart from 200 years of no maintenance, and eventually pipes are going to get corroded and things like that. And the radiation is everywhere, it's ubiquitous. And building new infrastructure is not going to be easy, but it could be done. And if people have access to clean water, they can have access to better food. And it's going to be easier then for people to be able to spend time on planning and building this kind of infrastructure, because they're fed, they're watered, they have their basic survival needs met, so they can start working on something more of survival needs for society and getting things going again. And sanitation as well. It is a very important, it's one of the most important inventions from a public health standpoint. Sanitation and, keeping water clean and treating water so that it becomes clean again. Sewage management, all of that. It's not a pleasant conversation topic, I understand. I was a vet, so, conversations about excrement and, bodily fluids and things like that, it was par for the course. And if you're in a medical persuasion, then, it's normal to get excited about poo sometimes. And I'm not joking, like, constipated cats, rabbits that haven't eaten for a couple of days, and you're worried that their guts have stopped moving, they get gut stasis, which can become really serious and they can get bloated. So it's very, very important that you treat them to get their guts moving. So when you get that first poo, it's a big deal, because that means that things are improving and the rabbits get a chance of getting better. So we do celebrate poo, we do celebrate pee. We accept that sometimes we're going to get covered in all sorts. It's one of these things, but keeping things clean is important. Having good sanitation as well for the water, and then if we could do that and we could get some plants in the ground, it could start to revive the soil here and start to revive the water cycle and get this place back to the verdant place that it once was. It takes people working together to do that, and inherently that's the problem in Fallout, is that, everybody wants to do things, but they want to do it their way, and they're not really interested in cooperating with each other and things. But this project, obviously, it was something that was very important to the player characters' parents. That was their life's work. They wanted to do this to make things better for the wasteland. And you finally get to, actualize that dream and make it happen. And it does then mean that there's potential for things to continue to improve, and for, all these things to be established and society to start to rebuild. So clean flowing water is the ideal for life, just like we can see here. You want water that's moving, you want water that's moving through the cycle. You have to be careful, like stagnant water, radioactive water, and water that's contaminated with sewage can be deadly and risks the spread of some nasty infections and diseases. So that's why this is so important. And, obviously, we all know that, the water, purifying the water is the main plot of the game. But it's such an important thing, and it's easily forgotten. And say when we get to talking about the Mojave Wasteland as well, we can really kind of contrast the difference, because even though the Mojave Wasteland is a desert and has always been a desert, while the Capital Wasteland is a newly formed desert because of the nukes. But because the Mojave Wasteland in the Vegas area wasn't hit anywhere near as hard with as many nuclear bombs, it means that a lot of the water is actually quite safe. And that's probably one of the reasons that the Mojave Wasteland is thriving a lot more compared to the Capital Wasteland, because, pure water, safe water is far more accessible than it is here until you complete this project and get it going. So, very, very important. Hopefully you find that interesting. It's it's an important topic, really, and I think sometimes we can kind of take it for granted that, we have. I mean, if you ask any Scottish person, they'll tell you that our tap water is among the best tap water in the world, and I'm not going to disagree on that, because it is. It's something. I mean, we, in terms of rainfall, we get more than our fair share of rainfall here as well. But it's interesting to see how much of a difference it can make. But not everybody's happy about the clean water. The mirelurks aren't doing too well, but they're kind of a nuisance, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. Could even call it kind of inadvertent pest control, if you like. But yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed that. Next week, we're going to talk about the food web, so that's going to be very interesting. So prey predators and who eats who and why humans are no longer an apex predator. So hopefully you'll join me for that. I have made a big chart to show you guys to talk through it. So hopefully you'll join me for that, and I'll catch you then. Bye.